morning and good evening, wherever you are. I'm your host, Kage, with
Neff.
And Buttons.
And today we are talking about Caesar, and I'm not talking Julius. We are talking, today's episode is called Caesar's Dead. Today we're going to talk about the Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, the latest in the Apes franchise. So I saw it recently. Did you guys see it?
Have not seen it. Buttons, you seen it?
No, I did not see it, but, a little fun topic for later is I did go back and rewatch the original Charleston Heston, the very first.
Awesome. Yeah, you can
Planet
chime
of
in
the
on
Apes.
that. Chime in on that. And funny enough, I haven't watched any of these Planet of the Apes movies, so this is going to be a little history lesson for me from Kage himself.
Okay, all right.
There's 4 altogether, correct?
Yes.
All right.
Yes, there's a lot to unpack here. So we're going to be talking mainly about the reboot franchise, but thanks to Buttons here, we can compare it to the OG ones. So that's really cool to have that comparison. But just to sum up the franchise, again, it's 4 movies, so I'm skipping a lot here. But the first movie is about how it happened. Okay?
Now we're talking about the newer trilogy, correct?
Yeah, well, the reboot series.
Yeah.
'Cause- and by the way, disclaimer: we're not talking about the one-off.
Wahlberg.
With
Yeah,
Wahlberg on it.
The other reboot that did not go so well.
Tim Burton, one of Tim Burton. I'm a big Tim Burton fan. You listen to our podcast, you'll hear us talk a lot about Tim Burton, but that's one of his low points in cinema, in my opinion. Is like, it was entertaining. It helped me pass the time, but nothing to write home about. But talking about this reboot here, the first movie is about the rise of the apes, how they got smart, how humanity started to, how this whole thing started. And in that first film, it had James Franco, thank you. Had James Franco
And John Lithgow.
John Lithgow, very good. He was trying to look up a cure for Alzheimer's, and he was experimenting with apes, and he wasn't supposed to. And then he was experimenting with apes, but then he wanted to do human trials, and his bosses were like, no, you can't do that. So he had a father, aka John Lithgow, that was going through like dementia, Alzheimer's.
Yeah, they were trying to experiment on the apes in order to find a cure for Alzheimer's,
Right.
which the father had.
Right. So he was like, well, I can take this home. Nobody will know. And lo and behold, it actually worked. He actually figured it out. But unknowingly, the initial side effect was you cured it. But as time went on, you realized it did not save his dad. You know, and
It worked for like a short period.
It worked for
of
a
time.
short period of time. You're right. And meanwhile, Caesar, who they named, he was the first one injected with this, whatever. He got green eyes as a result of the experiment. And in the movie, he gains the ability to speak. Now, you got to realize apes, they communicate in sign language. You see it on YouTube, TikTok, whatever. Nothing new.
Yeah, apes and gorillas.
Right, they can be taught sign language. And it was a very prolific moment in the movie when Malfoy is poking him.
Yeah,
I'm sorry, I can't think of as anything other than that. But
it's hard to,
but he's prodding him with a stick, and he's being abusive. And then at one point, Caesar yells, "No!" like that, and the entire theater was like, "Oh, wow." Like chills. You had goosebumps. And so that right there was a defining moment in the entire franchise. And as the story goes on, Caesar teaches other apes how to speak in sign language. But then as the franchise goes on, they gain the ability to speak in simple words. As the series goes on, those words become more articulated sentences, you know.
Yet he never says "my precious."
And he never says "my precious," because let me tell you, that would have been amazing. I would have been all for that.
That would have been such a weird Easter egg in there.
I feel like there's a missed opportunity there. They could have definitely
I
done
haven't
that.
seen this, but I have to agree with Kage. probably could have been an opportunity for that in this film. I could just see him
Yeah,
saying that about
absolutely.
something.
Well, for our listeners, that reference is to the actor that did all of the motion for Caesar, as well as the voice of Caesar, was also the same actor who was Gollum in
Andy
Lord of the
Serkis.
Yep.
Rings. Yes.
He's something else. He was also in Avengers with Ultron, Age of Ultron. Yeah, he was the bad guy in there that lost his arm. So Andy Serkis was actually not playing like a character. He was actually
Yeah,
playing
he was
a human
acting,
character.
yeah.
He was acting, right. But yeah, so that's kind of a summation of like the first movie. So the first movie was about how the apes got the virus and started to become smart. The second movie has a time jump where it has humans are now in kind of like, I don't want to say factions, but they have camps. They've clearly been beaten. Society is starting keyword on the decline.
Yeah, so something important that you just kind of briefly mentioned, which is, when the apes finally banded together, it was apes, gorillas, orangutans, all of the different primates. That virus that they had spread amongst them.
Yes.
And so then they all started to, basically take on those intelligent characteristics that they were trying to hope to cross over to humans. And that crossover to humans that happened was actually killing people.
Yes, thank you very much.
That is where you lead into that time jump. And after this virus has essentially gone around the globe, I can't remember if they called it the ape virus or
Simian flu.
Simian flu. That sounds right. Yeah.
Yeah,
So they
I
had the
think-
simian flu, and that wiped out a good percentage of the population because people, they didn't have any immunity or antibodies or anything like that to this
Right.
new thing that was accidentally created.
Correct. So that's a very important point. Yeah. So that being said, like as the franchise goes on, humans kind of devolve a little more. They can talk. They're organized. They have a base. One of the movies, their leader is Gary Oldman, and he plays that leader of their human encampment. And they're fighting against it's no pun intended, but guerrilla warfare.
Yeah.
Big.
I think, was Gary Oldman the second movie or the third movie?
It all bleeds together.
Because
I'm not gonna lie
I
to you,
know, I think the other wasn't, Zombieland guy. Wasn't he?
Woody Harrelson.
Woody
Yeah,
Harrelson.
yeah.
He was the other bad guy.
Yeah.
And I can't remember if he was the second movie or the third movie.
Yeah, I don't know off the top of my head, but you are right. They're two
He
important.
was the third,
He was the third one?
I think.
Okay.
Okay.
So, like you were saying, the people have started to kind of group together for survival purposes, but in the apes have all gone off into the forest and have abandoned the cities and everything, and they're trying to live on their own peacefully.
Right.
But with the second one, you have everybody kind of trying to figure out how to survive, but also they're trying to kill all the apes because they blame them for everything.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. So there's that faction, and it should be noted too that again with the time jump, nature has kind of overtaken places that were nature's held back by humanity.
Right, and then
so
with such a loss of humanity, it's unable to be maintained the way
correct.
it was.
That's absolutely correct. And so you see the apes; they go from just looking at Caesar and Caesar's doing sign language and talking little words to now he's talking more words. They're starting to talk words. Then as time goes on, you see them riding horses and using tools and building tree houses and doing all this stuff. Meanwhile,
and they start to have kids, and
they
they're
start to have
teaching
kids,
the kids,
and the kids are born with the green eyes now, and they have this ability, the bigger frontal lobe, so to speak. But then the humans, they start getting dumber. They start losing the ability to speak, losing the ability to reason, almost becoming
Now
more
that
like.
didn't happen in the first
No, I'm
three
speaking.
movies.
I'm just saying, overall, they started the humans started to get lower in population.
Regress.
regress. That's
Yeah.
exactly what I'm getting. I'm not speaking in chronological order of the movie. I'm just kind of giving an overall the
Yeah.
franchise. But that's basically what happened, of course. And in the films, there's attempts basically to try and have peace. And at the end of the third film, you had one human guy that was trying to be good, and Caesar acknowledged him, and he's like, "We almost made it." And he goes, "Yeah," and he goes, "You need to run because the next time I see you, I won't. It's war."
Yeah,
and he's
it
like,
came
"War," and he
down
said,
to
and Caesar said, "War has already begun." And I'm like, "Ooh!" Like that gave me chills.
Yeah, because I mean, to your point, what ends up happening of just like all wars, is you see that divide, and in this case, obviously, we're talking about primates and humans as far as the two factions, but they're both have families, they're both trying to protect their families.
Yeah.
And that was ultimately what happened with Caesar and his family. He had several different types of apes and primates and all the different things that were grouped together in his, and he even has kids at this point. And, all the other people, all the humans, they're still, they're having new kids, but they're also reeling over the loss of their past loved ones that have,
Yeah.
because it hasn't been such a long time ago that the people who are the older people still remember the way the world used to be before all of the simian flu had happened. So you have quite a few people that are still quite pissed off
Yeah.
about that, and then you have the Caesar's group who are there's still quite a few of them that are pissed off about how they were treated, but also with humans beginning to hunt the apes and things like that, you have that conflict that arises to where you launch them into war because they
Yeah.
start attacking each other.
And also, but as time goes on, there's starting to be rivals within the human side, rivals between the ape side, because you got Caesar who's like, I was raised by humans, they're not all bad, and he's trying to pass that teaching on to his followers. And then the humans, you got some of the humans that are the same way. They're trying to say, hey, we can coexist. And all it takes, and that's exactly what happened, was Woody Harrelson. He kind of went off on his own and did his own thing. And then Caesar, like, even the human guy was like, hey, Woody Harrelson, that's not cool.
That's not cool.
Blah, blah, blah. Yeah, chill. But yeah, they were like, those two tried to keep the peace, Caesar and this man, but in the end, their people on their respective factions screwed up any chances of peace. So they're like, a war has
I
already
think
there
you
was
guys
some-
put that together really well, just
Yeah.
giving a whole synopsis
Right,
of
right,
all
that-
the films, which brings us to the fourth film.
Yes.
I'm going to let Button say what she needs to say, and then we're going to go into how all this comes together.
Yeah. So before we launch into the new film, because the new film I think closely is going to connect the original Planet of the Apes movie with kind of some of the lore and that of these newer rebooted movies. So again, as we mentioned, we see the beginning of what all happened to where you get to the original Charlton Heston version of Planet of the Apes. And with that, just to give you a brief synopsis of what it is, he's basically him and 4 or 3 other people are in a space capsule or a spaceship, and they've been launched into space. And the idea is that they would be time traveling, because the theory that the scientists that sent them up there had was that once they get up there, they'll find either some kind of wormhole or space distortion, time distortion that was going to allow them to return to Earth in a different time. or maybe even go to another planet, or, they weren't really 100% sure, but they assumed that they would come back to Earth. It would just be a different time. And I think the original, time jump that they were supposed to do was only like maybe a couple hundred years, something like that. And something malfunctioned in the systems, and they end up crash landing. Not that they realize at the time, but they crash land back on Earth, and they're like, oh my gosh, this is a completely different planet. What went wrong? We don't know. One of their crew members died because their sleep chamber or hyperbaric chamber, or whatever you want to call it, failed. It had a leak, and so they're like, oh yeah, she died really quickly. She suffocated, right? Like really early on into the mission. And so it's him and two other guys, and they're trying to figure it out. And then all of a sudden they come across what, they're like, oh, there's these primitive, humanoid people, and they don't realize that they're actually humans. They're just like, oh, they can't communicate, they can't speak. And then they're being hunted by these apes, right? And they get captured. All the humans get rounded up that they end up finding. And I will say this about the Mark Wahlberg version versus the Charlton Heston version. If you thought that there was some I guess filler in that movie, Charlton Heston version, there is a lot of them just running and being chased, and not in an entertaining way, like running down the side of a hill or mountain. I'm just like, did we need that? Can we just see
They have the
them
Benny
start
Hill
at the
theme
top?
playing in the background.
No, but that would have might have been more entertaining. But anyway, so he gets abducted, and just like in the Mark Wahlberg version, that's basically what happens. But with Mark Wahlberg, it's only him. So they ditched his co-pilots, or whatever you want to call them, in this version. With Charlton Heston, though, he's like constantly, he's trying to like find out what happened to the other two guys, because they were all captured together. But when he's in a cage and he hears all these scientists, talking about humans, and they're trying to do experiments on humans and everything. It's kind of like showing the difference, or basically what it would have been like for apes during that time when they were captured and then
Interesting.
experimented by humans. So that was the whole twist on it. As far as, during that time frame, which if you think about it, during then you had a lot of animal activist movements going on at that time, quit testing on animals and,
Yeah.
all those type of things. So it was interesting in that sense. But basically, to sum up the rest of the movie, he finds out his friends were killed. One of them was like lobotomized, and it's all for the sake of religion, basically, science and religion. And the way that the apes had set up their society was they created a religion that basically said how evil humans were and how great apes are, right? And they're basically saying like, oh, we cannot, we can't trust humans, we can't, they're vicious killers, and they're gonna ruin everything. They destroyed the planet, or almost destroyed the planet, with how they overfarmed it, and were wasting resources and stuff like that. And eventually, the apes rose up to reclaim the planet, to save the planet, and over time, that was how the apes developed. And like I said, they had this kind of awakening. Now, within that religion, it said that humans never were evolved. So basically, kind of like how we view apes, and we say, oh yeah, they can't have any form of civilization, they're not smart enough. They're all like, humans are idiots. Like They can't do
interesting.
anything, like, and even though they have, in the case of this version, like the colony that he, finds, they're like, yeah, we don't go into this desert wasteland. We know nobody can survive out there. It's a forbidden zone kind of thing. And so they're very isolated, in their little, community. And that's how they kind of keep it under wraps in terms of the fact that there's still artifacts out there, like evidence of previous
So-
civilization from the humans.
This almost sounds like a different dimension as opposed to time. Because in this franchise, it's acknowledged that a long time ago humans were the dominant species on Earth, and then now apes
it's
have taken over. Whereas in this story you're discussing, it's humans have never been that way. Humans have always been dumb,
Right.
stupid animals, so
Well,
to speak.
But that's kind of what I'm getting at. So he meets different, apes that are like in power, right? And one thing that I found very interesting is, because they kind of briefly touch on it a little bit, which is, humans, we separate ourselves into different races, right? So we sit there and we're like, okay, and we fight over that, right? We fought over that for, thousands of years. And with the apes, they kind of did the same thing, where it was like, oh, chimpanzees are on the lower, class system. Orangutans are like way up there, and I think it was mainly they had orangutans, chimpanzees.
Silverback gorillas, where they stand,
know,
they got to be up there.
Honestly,
I would
didn't
imagine.
I don't remember seeing any gorillas in the original Planet of the Apes. I
Interesting.
don't.
There was in that.
I think they had orangutans, they had chimpanzees.
Okay.
And they might have also had, no, they didn't have baboons either. I think it was mainly orangutans
Okay.
and chimpanzees. But chimpanzees, which Caesar was a chimpanzee, but
Yeah.
the orangutans were actually in power. So it's kind of like, and like I said, they kind of look down on the chimpanzees as being like a lower class of ape. Like, oh, we just barely gave you, a seat at the table to start being considered of a high enough caliber.
To be fair,
Yeah.
we're letting you in to participate,
yeah.
but we
it-
don't grant you the what is
The
it, the rank of
privileges
of
and-
Grandmaster.
In numbers.
Yeah,
Strength
so-
in numbers.
So basically it was an interesting way, because like I said, even amongst these apes who, once they developed their hierarchy of intelligence and government and everything else, they still managed to be all like, oh no, you're a chimpanzee. You go over there and you can only do these jobs, or you can only do.
They have their own caste system.
Exactly. They had their
Wow.
own caste system. So anyway, with the orangutan, right, he's like one of the lead scientists, right? And he's also like a religious leader too. So there was not a clear separation between like science and religion, which used to be like the way it was back in like the Dark Ages, right? Basically what the church says is what goes. And so he's like, oh yeah, I knew that humans used to exist and be smart and, all this other stuff. He's like, but we can't let everybody else know. Like, that's how
I'm glad you brought that
we get
up.
control, like keep control.
I'm glad you brought that up because that plugs into this. So talking about the latest movie. So like I said, the first film was about, again, of the reboot. The first film is the origin of how this started, how apes got smart. And as the movies go on, humans get they regress, devolve, and the apes get smarter and smarter and smarter. And along the way, there are apes that have a problem with Caesar and his vision, thinking he's making them weak or whatever, and they challenge him for leadership. And there's some scuffle there, but in the end, our boy Caesar always comes up on top, and there's squabbling amongst the humans. Doesn't matter who comes out on top, because obviously humans suck in these films. But in the latest one, there's time jumps, okay?
It's like
And
several generations. Right?
yeah. So there's a lot of time jumps. Generations go by. Caesar is no more, and Caesar is looked upon as kind of a messiah for the apes, almost the stuff of legends. Only the oldest of them actually remember, while everyone else is learning about this historical figure. And as you would in any religion, people adopt the teachings of Caesar and they kind of make it their own. Some of them are taken to the extremes, just like we have in real life, and they start doing crazy stuff, terrorist,
Acts.
terroristic acts,
Yeah.
if you will. And so so this film features factions now of the apes. They do not live in peace. They do not live in peace. And it should be noted that this film takes place, like, I know I just said there's a time skip. It actually goes into the very last scene of 3. So go and watch those movies. I highly recommend you see those. We're going to talk about what I thought about this film in a moment. But overall, I'm going to have to say that I'm kind of over it. I've rather enjoyed the Apes franchise, the James Franco movie, the first 3 films. I was very entertained, but I'm kind of over it. And I went to the movie thinking, okay, well, I've seen all the other ones. Let me see what else they have to offer me. And unfortunately, it's like, I don't know what I was expecting. I don't know where you can. Okay, humans have officially been not extinct, but devolved. There's hardly any humans in the movie, at least not in the way that we're used to seeing in film. They're like
Now they in the preview for this movie, they did kind of insinuate that none of the humans at this point could speak anymore.
yeah. So
But the one
that
little
is
girl that they found, she was able to?
yes,
Okay, and that was
Yes.
why they were saying she was so special, because she could speak.
right. That's absolutely correct. And so, yeah, humans are very rarely seen. If you do see them, they're in the stream, drinking water, wearing loincloths with really dirty.
Caveman looking.
Yeah, pretty much. No, that's pretty much accurate. And when they're caught in the stream, they're like, "Oh no, we've been found." They scatter, and it's like a herd, but it's so surreal because it's a herd of humans, And the apes are on horseback and carrying spears and lassos. I gotta round up these humans by the river.
Did
We
they have
found
nets?
them. Nets, yeah,
Yep.
yeah. And then all the humans like scatter, and it's just so trippy. Like I gotta praise them for that. Like how well they put that together. But
That is, I think, a direct throwback to the original Planet of the Apes, because that is exactly how he gets captured. The Charlton Heston's character, and then the 2 other NASA spacemen, or whatever you want to call them, that were with him at the time. They came across them. They were in a field. There was like some streams nearby and everything, and some trees. And they just walk up to them. And at first, the people, it's exactly like you said. They act like animals. They're like, almost like doing that whole prairie dog or meerkat thing where they're like freeze, or like deer in the headlights kind of thing. And they're all like, "Oh, you're people. Like, what are you? Are you a threat? Are you safe?" Like, I don't
Yeah,
know.
yeah.
And then as soon as like they hear something or whatever, maybe somebody, I don't know, made a noise or something, and they're like, "Oh crap!" But of course they're not speaking, but they do take off like a herd, and they just kind of scatter in multiple directions. It's like every man for himself kind of thing, and they run off in all different directions because, like you said, they come in on horseback and they start rounding them up.
yeah. So kind of more to that point. It shows a follower of Caesar, I should say. It shows another ape, and he's got the green eyes. I think he himself was a descendant of Caesar.
Okay.
I think so, and he ends up meeting a orangutan that is he studies the teachings of Caesar. And this is really funny because in modern day, you have the cross of Christ. Everyone knows what that is, whether you follow that religion or not. In this film, some of them have a pendant, a circular pendant, okay? And what's funny is it's a callback to the very first movie, the James Franco movie, because Caesar, he stayed in the attic. And his window in that attic, his only window to the outside world was a circular window. So it's funny, that is their cross, that is their symbol. None of them have no idea that it was a window. But when they talk about Caesar, they talk about him with reverence, you know. And he taught us that apes together are strong, and apes don't attack apes. We shouldn't be doing this. These factions shouldn't exist. We should all be united.
Right.
And he's trying to teach, and this guy, he's like telling him that humans used to be the dominant species. He's like, no way. And he goes, yeah. And then he shows him pictures in a book that shows apes in a zoo behind bars and humans walking around with clothes and their hair combed and everything. And he's just like, mind is blown. He goes, if all the apes knew this would incite like panic or something. Because the generations have passed. They have no idea that what they're doing is not natural. This is not the way things used to be, you know? And so it's kind of, the movie follows this one ape's discovery of that, and he starts learning that humans had a place in this world, a dominant place in this world. And now bringing it into this girl that they see, the girl, like all the humans scatter, okay? But this one girl, she stays. Not only does she stay, she's following them. And they see that her following, they hear her following, and they turn around, and like sometimes they'll see her like duck behind a tree, and they're like, come out, we're not gonna hurt you. And they give her food, and she gets her food and runs behind the tree and eats it. And while she's like looking at him, like you get the impression that she's feral, you know. And then finally she speaks, and it's not like Caesar's first speaking, like she can speak. And again, to them, that's unheard of. They're like, oh wow, you know. And so as the movie goes, she starts explaining, you know, she was taught to stay silent because silence equals survival, you know. And I'm only going to talk when it's absolutely needed, when trust is absolutely established. And so she has her own agenda. She's going to cooperate with these apes just as long as she can to achieve her ends. And the movie ends with her getting her hands on some information. I don't want to give away too much, and that's kind of difficult. And this goes into why I didn't really like the film.
Well, I'm sure they set these up for another trilogy.
Kinda. We'll talk about that.
Let's hear your rating.
So this film, I gave a 5 out of 10, and that's
Ouch.
me trying to be nice, because the thing is, it was just a lot of talking. And you got to think, in the first 3 movies, it was exciting to see the origin story. I'm always a sucker for a good origin story, but then the movies that came after were like
A lot of action.
a lot
fighting.
of a lot of action, a lot of fighting. But it's not just that. It's like you get to see the evolution of ape and the de-evolution of man. And so after the transition has been complete, what are you going to show me? And that's the problem. You've already had the buildup. You've already told me the story. The end-all result was what I knew it was going to be from the beginning of the whole series, was apes were going to be the dominant species. Humans are subpar now. We're devolved. It's happened. What are you going to do? What are you going to build up? Because now the apes are acting just like humans, and at this point, I'm just watching a regular movie.
Well,
Because
so
99% of the movies that we watch today are humans.
I think what you're saying is, when is the pendulum going to swing?
Right.
or what's the end game in it?
And that's my point, is that the transition has completed. There is no end game. We've reached the apex of this franchise. Apes are on top. End of story.
Well, and to your point, and this is maybe what the movie did not accurately portray, is, I will say this, watching the first Planet of the Apes, and I know I've seen bits and pieces of the other ones, and I might in fact watch them, but it feels like you're watching an episode of The Twilight Zone. At least for the very first one, it feels exactly like that. And because, like you said, they crash land on this planet and everything is upside down. Man is being thrown in cages and can't speak and have no rights and are treated like animals. And what we would have considered animals, the way we treat apes and monkeys and different things like that, they're on top. They're the intelligent ones. They're the ones who have an established civilization of order and law and religion. And basically, their scientists are so similar to the way that we approach, our scientists today would approach animals and say, oh, we must try and figure out their secrets. Oh, we have to, experiment on them and try and see what we can learn from them and see if they, the theory that maybe some distant ancestor is related to an ape, versus right now our whole theories is of evolution said we came from apes, as far as that theory. But what I find interesting, because like I said, since it's that Twilight Zone, feeling to it, is you have Charlton Heston, who's, he's supposed to be a scientist. Like, he's supposed to be this big, like, NASA kind of guy, right? But they very much made him almost like a macho, like, Western kind of character. Like, he is, he does have intelligence. It's not that he's, stupid or anything, but they make him, out of the group of his whole group of people, he's more of the kind of like pessimistic, surly, I'm just in it for the kicks kind of guy. Like, he's like, I went on this mission, but I have no real investment in the science aspect of it. He's like, I'm in here.
I'm here to kick ass and chew bubble gum.
Yeah,
I'm all
pretty
out of
much. Gum. Yeah. So yeah, I can almost see him, like, if this movie had been done in a Western style, like, I can see him with like the cowboy hat and some spurs, and he's like, I'm gonna kill me some apes.
That concept right there sounds a lot more entertaining than what I saw.
Well, at this point, I can see what you're saying, though. Like you said, they've kind of exhausted the timeline.
There's nothing more that you can tell me, and
there's nothing to build up to.
Yeah.
Other than you make another 3 films talking about how humans get the power back because this girl has some information.
Because I'm not going to watch I don't want to watch a never-ending franchise of 2 or 3 movies of one side getting up and the next movie bats up. And yeah, exactly. And it's like, at that point, you've lost me. There has to be an end. I don't want to see monkeys in space with Dominic Toretto.
That's the
and
second
it's all about
one.
family.
That's the second Planet of the Apes movie.
So we had a box office.
Escape from Planet of the Apes.
Oh, yeah.
Ew.
That's the space apes.
Hey,
Doing it.
I was just gonna say this. You asked me about a new trilogy. So this movie, I'm gonna say this. This is kind of a spoiler. So if you guys want to go out and see it for yourself, let it be known I'm about to say something. Okay, 3, 2, 1, go. If you have not seen the movie already, this was your one and only warning. So the movie ends with this girl getting in contact with an underground base of humans. Yeah,
It's a
we
base.
spent the entire movie seeing humans being devolved and not really talking in sign language and everything. And this one girl, being the smart one, oh no, she got in touch with an entire underground base, and satellites are involved. And they're like, oh, we have communication. What base are you at? Blah, blah, blah. And then it cuts.
The truth
And I'm like,
is out
oh, yeah, right? Mulder and Scully, hello.
You were not alone.
You were not alone. And like, cue Jodie Foster with Contact. But but yeah, so they kind of opened it up to that, and I'm like,
And,
there's-
that does make sense though, because, as we mentioned before, there would probably have been during that simian flu outbreak, a branch or group or whatever you want to say, a collection of, underground government funded bunker type,
Yeah.
stuff,
it's
where they would have been waiting for the flu outbreak to end, and then waiting for the wars to end, and then finally they're like, oh crap, all these bad things are happening, we're just going to stay down here.
Judging from how it ended, it actually sounds like a pretty good end.
Well,
I don't
and-
think there's anything wrong with leaving that cliffhanger.
Yeah.
Now
And-
your mind gets to imagine, okay, well, did the humans find a
That-
way to get them? Did they figure out a way to get out
Mm-hmm.
of the situation? How did they find a way to contain the power? What happened to the girl? I think that is actually stronger than them actually doing another trilogy. Because it's going to lead
Exactly.
into what you're saying. Okay,
Exactly.
you do another
They-
trilogy and then what? Oh, just this again? Like, okay,
and then
we saw this.
are we going to get another trilogy with the humans coming back on top?
Imagine this. So as I mentioned, right, so in the original movie, and this is kind of where I would say would be a good way for them to wrap it back to the original Planet of the Apes movies, is the little girl, like you said, she's associated with this base, okay? In the very first Planet of the Apes movie, these scientists knew that these astronauts were going to be up there and they were going to be returning. Well, they didn't come back for a long time, but in the beginning of the second movie, because it auto-started for me, I haven't finished it, but that one, you have the entire, I think it was supposed to be the U.S. government. I'm pretty sure it was, because the original crew was from the U.S. But anyway, they're like sitting around helicopters and all this stuff, and the pod had landed in the water, and they drag them out of the water. They tow the whole pod back, and that's when they open it up to reveal the apes, and they're like, ah, and it's all craziness, right? So if they find a way to connect it to where they were like, oh, these apes, sometime in the, I don't know, let's just say it was the 60s, right? In the 60s, they came to the United States and told all of the military, hey, in about 3,000 years, you guys are toast. Like, you guys are no longer, like you said, you're no longer running the show. The shit has hit the fan. You guys need to prepare now, because there's no stopping it. It's coming, and maybe that's where they would be able to tie it to the original. And that would be an interesting way to end it finally, and just be like, oh, see, we're right back at where
I don't want to
they-
see this franchise go on forever. I want to say the beginning of the movie was that held my attention, because it showed scenes from
the previous.
like, it picked up right where it left off.
Flashbacks, kinda.
Right, but then I was like, I'm not gonna lie, I was struggling not to fall asleep. And then when the movie ended, I heard two guys 2 rows behind me actually saying they did fall asleep. And I'm like, man, but what piqued my interest towards the end was that ending I just said. So I was like, I do agree with you, Neff. That was like, okay, all right, that it was a good end. It wasn't enough to save the movie for me, but
Keeps you wondering.
keeps you wondering. Exactly.
So box office the box office is 294.8 million. The movie cost 160 million.
Yeah.
So they got their production budget back, but I think this is going to be the lowest grossing Planet of the Apes film in the new franchise.
Yeah.
it says
So
a lot.
far, it is that.
So, and I think it's going to stop making money in about a week or two. So I think it could get to probably 330.
You think
if
so?
it's lucky.
Yeah. Well, it's definitely got.
It's gonna
the
sit
end
in
of the
theater
year-
for a while.
Yeah, by the end
True.
of the year with international and everything else, I mean, I think they'll land somewhere around 400. But that's just, like I said, that's not within a month or anything. That's by the end of the year. So,
Kage, thoughts on that box office?
That sounds a little high. Just looking at the box office of the previous films. Again, we're speaking of the reboot. This is the weakest of the movies.
But I mean, it's already sitting at 290.
I mean, that's not bad, but considering how ingrained in American pop culture this is, how long it's been going on, Planet of the Apes is like Batman in America. Okay, every so often you're gonna have another Batman movie. It's just a part of our culture, like baseball, like apple pie, whatever. You're gonna have you're always gonna have an Apes movie now. And maybe years from now they can reboot the franchise in some way. I imagine that's gonna happen. This is too big of a franchise to let go. But I think if they would have made 1, 2, and 3, I would have been satisfied.
Interesting.
The Rise of the Apes and the end of Caesar, Apes win. Okay, I've seen everything I need to see. Anything past Caesar's death, now you're just beating a dead horse. Now I'm like, okay, the apes are acting like humans. What's the difference at this point of me watching a human post-apocalyptic movie? It's all leveled out to me now. You have nothing more to offer me as an audience member.
Interesting. So with that being said, I think that's going to wrap it up for this episode. Do you want to take this one out, Kage? That was very good from both you guys, Buttons and Kage. Great history lesson on the Apes movies. So it definitely made me more interested in it. The only one I have seen is the Mark Wahlberg one, all the way through.
What?
Obviously, I know like the Planet of the Apes and stuff like that, but and even that, I was like 10 years old when I saw that movie. But they say that's like the worst one. But I'm just not into the Apes movies.
Yeah,
but maybe I'll watch them. I think they're on Hulu right now. So Buttons, if you're trying to watch, you go watch there.
No, that's where.
But it might be something I go back and look at, and I think the way you guys brought everything together. It makes it more interesting to me. But yeah, I think that's going to do it for this episode. Any other thoughts?
I think we hit it.
Got everything there, Buttons? Anything else you want to add?
No.
Alrighty, guys. Please like, subscribe, comment, ring the bell for notifications. Let us know if you saw this Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes film. And also let us know what you think about it. And let us know if you'd like to see either a reboot of the series or a sequel to this film. With that being said, guys, be safe.
Be safe.